The first match of the Bledisloe Cup happening this weekend in Australia. The All Blacks, they are announcing their side tomorrow, but before that, I have decided I'm going to give my XV of what I would love to see in this matchup up against the Aussies. The first of the two matches, you want to make sure you're starting on a high, and both of these sides coming off losses, so both looking for redemption as well, but starting off with the front row, we do know that Ethan de Groot is now back with the squad after playing for Southland in the Bunnings NPC, but I do think that the best option is to stick with the same front row that they did have in the last contest. That is Tamati Williams as the number 1, Cody Taylor number 2, and number 3, Tyrell Lomax. Now, we've also seen the injury of Fletcher Newell, which means he will not be available for this first matchup, but Tyrell Lomax, with the exception of that yellow card right at the end of the last contest up against South Africa, his last two performances have been extremely strong, and you could also argue he should have been subbed by that stage of the match anyway when they did have Fletcher Newell ready to come off the bench. Ethan de Groot, I think he would be a great option to come off the bench alongside Asafo Amoa and also Pasilio Tosi, a man who hasn't had too many minutes, but I hope that he gets some up against the Wallabies here. Moving on to the locking duo. Now, this is very tricky because you've got a guy in Scott Barrett who, with the captaincy, will be in the starting lineup. But if we're basing it off what we've seen recently and someone else who's just recently returned from injury in Patrick Tuipulotu, I honestly think the strongest combo that they have got at the moment is number 4, Patrick Tuipulotu, and number 5, Tupavai. Now, that would still include Scott Barrett in my 23-man side. I would have him as an impact player making his way off the bench. Now, they might also consider going with Tuipulotu off the bench with Scott Barrett in the starting lineup. He's had some rough games up against the Australians in the past. A little bit of disciplinary problems up against the Wallabies as well. But I just want to see a really big performance from Scott Barrett. But I honestly think that while having the captaincy, it's just a bit too much pressure on him. So I would like to see him instead get the freedom of coming off the bench. Maybe that would help calm some of those nerves and help him go back to being informed, because at the moment he had some good moments throughout games, but he's also making a lot of mistakes that I don't think they can afford to have throughout the Bledisloe Cup. Now, Tupavai, he has been in sensational form over the last maybe 5 or 6 games. He's really stepped up, and he's kind of having the performances that a lot of people felt like Barrett was going to have throughout this Rugby Championship. But Tupavai, he's getting turnovers, he's winning lineouts, and he's doing pretty much everything correct, which is why I keep him in the starting side. Now, that would also mean that Sam Darry misses out if I have those 3 locks. So, unfortunately for Darry, it might be a little bit longer till he gets that next opportunity in the loose forward trio. Number 6, this is where I believe they've found a very strong option at blindside flanker, and that is Wallace Satiti. The man did extremely well up against the South Africans when he was given that chance to start. It's not his preferred position, but it is certainly one that he could grow into if that is where the All Blacks want to play him. Now, they already have a lot of 6 options. They have Sama Penifee now. They have Luke Jacobson, who can play 6 as well as 8. You've got Ethan Blackadder, who looked like he was going to be the 6 for the All Blacks. But I think while Wallace Satiti is playing as well as he is, he should be given minutes. And I'd like to think that they would reward form in this All Black side, but we just don't know whether or not that is the case as of yet, based off a few of the other selections we've seen so far. But number 6, Wallace Satiti. Number 7, when I mentioned my initial team that I would have liked to see up against the Aussies, I actually mentioned Peter Lakai here. The man isn't even in the squad, but he was someone that I could see them bringing in possibly, rather than Ethan Blackadder, who did have that injury. But since Blackadder, I believe, is all right, I would actually have him here as the number 7. That would mean that Sam Cane and Dalton Papali'i do miss out on the starting lineup, but I would have a spot for one of those 2 off the bench. Now, Sam Cane is the most likely to start up against the Australians, but I just feel like Ethan Blackadder, Wallace Satiti, and also who I've gone with at number 8, little bit of a spoiler, it's Ardie Savia. That would be a very strong and pretty dynamic loose forward trio. You'd have the running of Satiti, you'd have the power of Savia, and then you'd have the work rate of Ethan Blackadder. Could be a great combination if they do want to try it, but I don't think they will. I think they'll go a little bit more safe, and it should still be relatively effective. Moving on to the back line. Number 9, I've gone with Cortez Aratama, and number 10, I have still stuck with Damian McKenzie, although For a lot of people, they have taken McKenzie out of their starting side. Cortez Ratima, people have been asking to see him get a few more minutes. He did decently in the game up against the South Africans, although in a match where the All Blacks weren't able to score a single try, that is, of course, a bit of a concern, but I don't think it was down to Ratima and McKenzie, as overall both of them had pretty solid performances. It was more so what was happening on the outside that was really hurting the ABs in that game. But Damian McKenzie, goal kicking, can be good, can be a bit rough at times. That last game, unfortunately, did fall into the rough category, but they do need quickness and they need pace on the ball, and that is what Damian McKenzie as well as Cortez Ratima can bring you up against an Aussie side that in the second half up against Argentina, we saw when the Pumas were pushing the pace, that's a tongue twister, the Australian backline left so many gaps open and Argentina just ran in try after try after try, and in the end beat the Aussies by 40 points. So New Zealand need that ball moving quickly so that Australia don't have enough time to adapt, and then that is where your tries will come from in this game. In the midfield combo, this is where we haven't seen a huge amount of tries scored for New Zealand. Number 12, I would go with Jordie Barrett still, just because I don't see them making two changes, even though I think maybe that would be a great option at this stage of the season. But number 12, Jordie Barrett. Number 13, Billy Proctor. If it's not Proctor, it has to be Anton Lienert-Brown, but they need a change. I don't know why they keep on rewarding Rico for below par performances. He's one of those players that can be absolutely phenomenal, but he hasn't found that throughout 2024. So rather than continuing to put him in there, maybe it's not a bad time to either have him off the bench or just give him a bit of a spell. Try and right those wrongs, give him some NPC time before heading into the November internationals. But for now, I think that Proctor and Barrett would be a strong combo. We saw Proctor play for the Wellington Lions in the Bunnings NBC. Now Wellington, they weren't able to get that Ranfurly Shield. We did see Proctor and Ruben Love, though, both playing in that contest. He looked a little bit rusty, but that is completely understandable because they haven't played him in the All Blacks since the game up against Fiji, which happened around 2 months ago. So he hasn't had a lot of game time, and it showed. But I do think if you stick him here up against the Australians throughout Super Rugby, he was really strong for the Hurricanes. For the Aussies, they are going to have players that Billy Proctor went head-to-head with throughout Super Rugby. So for me, it just makes sense to finally give him that chance. And yes, if he has a below-par performance, then maybe you can look at switching back to Rico for the second match. But I just would hate to see them not give it a go for these two matches up against Australia. So that is my combo, Billy Proctor alongside Jordie Barrett. Moving on to the back three, number 11. I feel like this jersey is pretty much cemented after the way that he has played throughout the Rugby Championship, and that is Caleb Clarke. Hasn't been doing too much wrong throughout this comp, and he has been extremely strong under the high ball, which is something that a majority of this All Blacks backline don't actually fall into that same category. We've seen guys who are normally solid having a few shaky moments, but someone who's done well is Caleb Clarke. He also has been scoring tries, although he is pretty humble because he will say his teammates are the reason that he's scoring them, but he just looks really strong out on that left wing side. Number 14, this is where I've reverted back to Will Jordan. While he's scoring tries, when he plays on that right wing, even if he doesn't touch the ball a lot, I think at the moment it's still the better option unless you're going to have a complete revamp of this backline. I mentioned about it in a recent video. If you put Jordan at fullback, you need to build your backline around him, and they haven't done that when he was there at number 15. So I would put him at right wing, and then I'd have Beauden Barrett back at number 15. Now, there were question marks of whether maybe someone like a Stephen Perofeta or a Ruben Love could find himself in the starting lineup for this contest up against Australia, but Ruben Love sadly picking up a bit of an injury in that Wellington game up against Tasman. And then on the other side of things, you got Stephen Perofeta, who, once again, similar to someone like a Proctor, hasn't had too many minutes throughout the last little while. But nonetheless, that is my All Blacks starting XV, ladies and gentlemen, that I would love to see up against the Australians in match number 1. There are many changes that we could make to it, but for now, I think it is a pretty solid side and perhaps something that they could consider for the future as well. But do let me know who you would like to see in the All Blacks starting 15. Like I mentioned, the side is going to be announced tomorrow, and as soon as it is, we will be having the video coming out on the channel. But thank you all very much for tuning in. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you all for the next one.